Welcome back to the Food on Demand podcast, where we dish up insights on the future of food relating to off-premises operations and the overall digital dining experience. I'm Bernadette Heyer, Managing Editor.
And I am Adam Wahlberg, the Associate Editor. Just a quick reminder that we put out a weekly newsletter with a lot of good stories and content. It comes out on Thursday, so if you're not currently subscribed, get on that. We want to see you there. Sign up for our weekly newsletter.
Yes, please do. And once again, I'm going to tee up our upcoming Food on Demand conference as we are thick into planning the agenda and it's shaping up really great. We're super excited for the event. As mentioned again, that's May 5th through 7th at the Bellagio in Las Vegas. And be sure to secure your spot early and don't miss the 3 days of editorial-driven panels and learn everything you need to know to boost your delivery business, attract and retain the digital guest, and so much more. But before I get into my guest interview today with Fred LeFranc, CEO of Results Thru Strategy, it's time for our quick bites once again. So Adam, what have you been working on?
Oh, thank you, Bernadette. I recently had a chance to talk to one of the folks at Freddy's Frozen Custard and Steak Burgers. They're of note because they're growing so rapidly. They, I think in the last year, opened 40 new locations. They're now close to $1 billion in revenues. And they seem to be scaling just super as smooth as their custard. So I'm like, well, how are they doing that? And I talked to their head of IT, a guy named Sean Thompson, and he told me kind of behind the scenes, one of its secrets is just how shrewdly they've upgraded a lot of their tech. A lot of their things for their back of the house and their kitchen display systems. And he gave me a couple examples. One is which they have now kind of this visual system for back of house sandwich assemblers. Like folks come in and they have unique orders and are like, oh, extra this, no this. I'm an extra pickles guy. And like in the past, they'd have to manually key that in, and in the back of the house, they'd have to kind of keep that all in their head while everything's moving quickly. Well, now they have this system where it's just visual. They just literally see what each sandwich requires, and they can just look at the screen. And it's created a much smoother operation. I think it's helped a lot of back house folks not feel as stressed out. And he told me that's something that's been a huge thing as far as how the operations, and it's allowed them to take these next steps into expansion, knowing that they have their tech in place. And it was a pleasure to talk to them. It's always interesting to find out what they're doing behind the scenes that maybe a consumer at the counter doesn't get a chance to see. It was a good discussion, and I definitely will keep an eye on Freddy's. It seems like they are just growing. And
Yeah, thank you. It's always interesting to hear about the innovation on the make line or what's happening back of house. Like, as you mentioned, that as consumers, you wouldn't know, but as an employee, you definitely see the difference when they bring that in. Well, thank you, Adam. My quick bite for today is an interesting turn of events in the food delivery world. Just Eat Takeaway, which used to own Grubhub, has been acquired by Process for a hefty $4.2 billion. Now, that isn't without its bumps. As we remember, Just Eat Takeaway made the big move of buying Grubhub back in 2021 for about $7.3 billion. And that didn't pan out exactly how they wanted, as they did end up selling Grubhub last year for just $650 million to a company called Wonder, which we followed. And that's backed by Mark Lohr, who the goal is to kind of revolutionize the food hall concept. But yeah, that's quite the drop in value right there for what they bought Grubhub for. But on top of that, Process is a company that, or sorry, excuse me, on top of that, Process is actually a backer of Delivery Hero, which is big in Europe, one of their big delivery companies, and is actually one of Just Eat's main competitors in the food delivery space. So there's definitely a bit of rivalry behind the scenes there. But Just Eat, which I mentioned is in Europe, based in Amsterdam actually, says it's now shifting its focus more on European markets and has dialed back its US operations. So it'll be interesting to see what the future holds for them. We know that in the US, DoorDash has most of the market share, with Grubhub kind of going on the wayside a tiny bit. So we will keep you updated on that market share competition.
yeah, it's super interesting, and it's such a global thing that we cover. What folks are doing in Europe and Asia's got its own
Yep.
infrastructure, and boy, it's wonderful to keep an eye on all of it.
Yeah, and I will say, if you're interested in learning more about what's happening, overseas and across the world with delivery, we do publish about a monthly article from our contributing writer Peter Backman, who does an international delivery piece for us, which one will be live this week. So that also discusses Just Eat's acquisition and so forth. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on that. That's all I have today, and I'll get into our guest interview now.
Excellent. Thanks,
Thank you,
Bernadette.
Adam. All right, now it is time for our guest interview with Fred LeFranc. He is the CEO of Results Through Strategy. Fred, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Looking forward to it.
Really appreciate it. I've connected with Fred quite a bit in the past few years. He's avid, always with food on demand, hosting panels or doing webinars for us. So excited to always bring his insights back to food on demand. But Fred, for anyone who hasn't met you yet or doesn't know about Results Through Strategy, can you tell me a bit about your background and what led you to your current role today?
Sure. Well, I've been in the restaurant business for a long time before you were born. I started with Lettuce Entertainment Enterprise in Chicago and was CEO of half a dozen restaurant companies before myself and some couple of co-founders started Results Through Strategy in 2007. And Results Through Strategy is a consulting firm that works with emerging and legacy restaurant brands. And in the most recent 6, 7 years, a lot of technology companies that sell to the restaurant space. We do a lot of technology work for restaurant companies looking at their tech stack, but the technology-based technology companies, a lot of them that sell to the restaurant space, seek our advice for branding, messaging, go-to-market strategy.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I'm sure that the tech world and adoption of that has really been ramping up in the past few years.
Oh yeah, thanks to COVID.
Yep, yep. And we'll get into some of that here. So I wanted to start off with one of the most buzzword things we hear in the industry, which is AI. I'm often following how restaurants are actually adopting AI and their use cases. And we talk about that a lot on the podcast, but I've been seeing lately this kind of a discussion about agentic AI, and I wanted to pick your brain about that, Fred. So can you kind of tell me about what you're seeing in the industry when it comes to that?
Yeah, AI is interesting because everyone's all a buzz about it, but quite frankly, very few people understand it. And
Right,
let me talk about the foundation before you get to agentic, because that's sort of the latest iteration that people are talking about. The one that's the oldest, been around forever, 25 years, is predictive AI. This is the one that sort of tells you what's going on. It does a lot of historical analysis, assessment, and then presents to you, recommendations and insights. So if you think about when you're on Amazon, and it might be one of those, you might also like X, or if you happen to have an Alexa and it says you might like this based on your buying history, that's
right,
predictive AI, and that's been around for a long, long time. Descriptive AI starts looking more into patterns that you might find with sentiment analysis and customer segmentation. That's been around a shorter amount of time, about 15 years. And that's been in use for many restaurant companies to think about an intelligent BI tool that might sit in the background. In fact, if you look at BI tools, in the early days, they gave you analysis. Here's a report, kind of a diagnostic. We had to do the analysis. Then it started giving you the analysis.
mm,
And now it started to give you the prediction of what you should try and do. Generative AI, which is the newer one. I mean, ChatGPT, November 22nd, 2022, seminal moment in civilization.
yeah,
That one does create brand new content because it accesses all the databases that it absorbs in there. It comes back with things. And by the way, there's a good chance that things like, there's a lot of different AI tools, but ChatGPT could replace Google as a search engine unless Google gets their act together.
mm,
And I'll give you a simple example. I like to cook. Okay, I'm in the restaurant business. And generally I'd say, oh, give me a recipe for chicken cacciatore, whatever the case may be. But if you go to ChatGPT and ask for that, it gives you the full recipe, all the instructions, all the shopping stuff instantly. And it says to you, would you like some modifications for it? So it's much more uh, focused, personalized. It's like having a conversation with someone else. And this could be across anything, whatever the case may be. And then now we have agentic AI. And this
yeah,
this is where this agent is why it's agentic, right? And this is where you get it to do things for you. You want to book a restaurant reservation. You want to order food to go. You want to manage your calendar. You want to negotiate a contract. You want to do things along those lines. This basically goes in and does all those things for you. And we're just scratching the surface. It's going to be much more powerful. I mean, it will be able to write a restaurant schedule specifically in the restaurants. It'll develop a prep list. It'll develop a basic look at how you are ordering your food. And so there's quite a few tech companies that are beginning to enter the space. Again, very early innings that will revolutionize how restaurants are run. And I had a long conversation the other day with someone about, will AI replace leadership? And I said, absolutely not. What AI will do is replace management. Leadership includes only human qualities, okay? Or management, all the mundane stuff of email management, tasks, and so forth and so on, AI will do a much better job of it and save us hours of brain work.
Yeah, that's a fantastic breakdown. And I think it was easy for people to follow, including me. And so it's interesting to see the adoption and how it's innovating so fast since it came on the scene more rapidly with ChatGPT. You mentioned the agent side of it. Are you seeing that this is something where restaurants will be needing to train the models at all? Is there a back end type of thing for when it comes to brand voice or organization for their brand?
I'm not sure the restaurants themselves, unless you're a really big company, will have the staff to do that. It'll be a
Right.
third party that'll do it for you. I mean, this includes developing, social media posts.
Sure.
It'll do a lot of that. It'll be able to organize, because a lot of photographies and videos included in that. Yeah, restaurants will use it, but I think it'll come through a third party. And as I mentioned, there's a half a dozen or more companies every day. I'm sure there's some I don't even know about that are going to come in different aspects of it. So if you recall years ago, there was I think it was Tasting Table came up with a graphic of a circle of all the various types of technology-enabled services companies that were available to restaurants. If you start looking at AI, you're beginning to see things that are more consumer-focused or things that are more back-of-the-house operations, things along those lines. And that's interesting. And so, food on demand, yeah, I'm a big fan. I've gone through since the first one, okay? And so I've been going to all of them. And I was always amazed at how so many of the cutting edge companies show up at food on demand.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt that this year will include that as well. We begin to see more of these AI companies being present on your panels as well as on your trade show floor to really help people begin to understand it. Because there's a lot of ignorance right now. And this is not a bad thing. Ignorance just means you don't know. And I think but the industry in the next 2, 3 years is going to see an explosion of all these AI tools, including the agentic ones. And you guys are on the cutting edge of it. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. And for me personally, I've been here for about 2 years now, 2.5 years, and just the change of discussion from 2 years ago to having AI in almost every tech discussion we have on stage, it just gets brought up naturally sometimes even. So definitely going to be a big topic this year at the conference. So anything else we haven't touched on with AI or anything you're particularly excited about, Fred, when it comes to this?
Well, if you begin to look at the companies that are offering some services, that's what's very exciting. So
Yeah.
it could be something like Nomad Go that you take a video of your inventory as you scan
Mm.
your storeroom and your cooler and it counts it for you. That saves you a tremendous amount of time, something like that. And of course, there's always going to be challenges and some accuracy, but there's things like that. Signal Flare AI that is using AI for pricing analytics and to help you understand how can I squeeze every penny I can out of my consumers without driving them away. Because in today's world, it's very critical. During COVID, we know there was a big spike in inflation. And I spoke at your sister conference, Restaurant Finance and Development, right around the sort of the end of COVID. And I told the audience, if you have not raised prices at least 10%, you're leaving money on the table. And I suggested people to go back home, take a few restaurants, test it, and see what happened. And I had so many CEOs come back to me and say, thank you, because we were able to take price that we've never been able to do. Ordinarily, you take maybe 1.5 to 3% at the most in an annualized year. 10% is unheard of. And then the people who didn't do it, the window closed. And now you can't touch your pricing without people freaking out. So it's a different world. It's a real value war out there. So things like that. Then also, let's face it, there's companies like Curbit that help you with your third-party delivery and pickup that you're
Yeah.
trying to do. There's other software that's helping you with your kitchen operations, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of prep food and all that kind of stuff to avoid waste. Other ones like Easy Assist that help you with your franchise operations. So again, a lot of different applications to
Yeah.
how these learning models can work for our benefit.
Yeah, it's just crazy to think about when you really break down all the different areas and how it really seems to be almost touching every aspect in running a restaurant nowadays. So That will sure be ramping up. Just circling back quickly to when you said the kind of like the make line, I've been hearing from operators that something they're interested in is somehow AI video, being able to see the make line to help with making sure they have the orders go out correctly. Any take on that? Or are you seeing that develop at all?
I think it's beginning to come about. I mentioned, maybe I didn't, Pressy Taste is a company that
Oh,
does
sure.
that. Okay, so they're doing it. And I'm not sure how AI dependent it is, but
Mm,
smart company that does a lot of the cooking platforms in terms of where things are made and how they're made. But yes, definitely the union of video that's over
yeah.
your cook line, and AI is able to understand it, and then from there give you immediate feedback on what you need to do. Let's face it, we're short-staffed. We're paying labor more than ever before, and there's a theory that the labor is not as skilled as it used to be. And let's face it, these AI models can do these things faster, easier, quicker, cheaper than a human can, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's like cobots. If you can get a cobot as opposed to just a straight robot, a cobot is a partner to begin to cook your burger with a flippy or begin to make your pizza. Why not? Because that means one person can do more. It's an extension of a human skill. Think about a kiosk. A kiosk is not a robot, but it's technology. Why would you pay someone to take someone's order that they're perfectly capable of placing themselves? The consumer has been trained to do that. Before you couldn't do that. Now you can. And that's the kind of thing that COVID really accelerated, and now it's going to become standard because the cost of labor just keeps going up and up and up and up. And while there may be a sense that people are being displaced from their jobs, they really aren't. Jobs that really have very little meaning and value can be eliminated so that you can begin to do better work as a human being. You can be trained in other things. And this has happened for centuries in this country. There used to be a time that farmers had to go behind a horse to help cut the weed or plow the field. Now they got these giant combines. Was
Yeah.
that it said some farmers lose their means of living? Of course. I don't want to be cynical about that. But at the end of the day, in order to leverage technologies are the things that occur. We're now doing it though with this information age
Right.
that's really changing and transforming, and not just our industry, it's transforming the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate that you touched on robotics there. Where do you see robotics heading? There's many areas we can touch. You mentioned Flippy. Back of house automation is I think what might be the first adopted. Those mundane tasks. I think about Chipotle with the avocado and things like that. But food on demand, we always follow delivery, and so I'm always interested in sidewalk autonomous delivery or even drones. What's your take on that, Fred? Interested to pick your brain.
Well, it's funny. Delivery is not just off premise; it's also on premise.
Right.
Years ago, I
Right.
had the chance to, again, speaking at Restaurant Finance Development Conference. I set this up. I got up on stage and I said, "Oh my God, I'm really thirsty. I could use a bottle of water." And John Hamburger came rushing up because he was up on stage and he said, "No, no, I got it. I got it." And then we had this robot from Bear Robotics come out and bring me. Her name was Penny. Bring me 2 bottles of water. And they've gone very, very large. SoftBank's invested into them. They do a lot in Asia. And so inside the restaurant, you have robots that now deliver your food or act as busters. Because I remember when I first saw the robot, I said, "Oh, you got to put a bus tub in this." And as a customer, hey, if I have to just take my dish and off my tape and put it into a bus tub, so what? And even though it's a concern about, oh, this robot, no one's going to like it, kids hug it. They're the ones that adapt. They're the future. They see this as they're used to this quasi automation. And I think
Mm,
it's working very well for them in that regard. I think the cobots in the kitchens will continue to grow. The biggest challenge is how do you fit them into the space? Some of these kitchens are pretty small, and then you have this robot that's running around doing things. So there's a challenge in terms of space planning and so forth and so on. I spent 3.5 years running a commercial bakery during COVID with working with a private equity firm that I'm invested in. And there's a lot of automation in manufacturing, a lot of automation. But these machines are big. These machines are very, very large. Where in the restaurants, we just don't have that kind of space. And I think that's going to improve. Let's face it, some of the early technology in kitchens was a timer on your fryer, just so
right.
you don't burn the fries.
Hmm.
That's simple now, but it's all to shams. These combi ovens, all that technology may not viewed as robotic in the classic sense of this machine moving around, but it is something that's taken away the need for a human being to retain all this information and act on it. I mean, Starbucks' entire food program is based off a combi oven.
Hmm.
And so I think it will
Yep.
continue to grow. We're going to continue to see more and more innovation as you see these robots, or as I call them, cobots, begin to scale down in size so they become more
Right.
practical.
Right. And I'm assuming as this becomes, scaled down and more practical and more adopted, we'll probably start to see more pop up in probably some of the larger QSR enterprises first, I'm assuming.
Yeah, because of the cost, the
Right.
CapEx. Like
Absolutely.
Sweet Greens bought Spice out of Boston, and that
Mm.
was literally 95% fully automated cook line that ended
Mhm.
up, it was tumble cooked. And then it would come down into a plate, and that plate would be set down, and then a human would grab the plate, garnish it, and then pass it over to the guest. And I know
Right.
that I don't know where they stand with it, but that was a very innovative thing. There are hamburger making machines that will
Hmm.
take it from scratch to finish. Again, they're very large. It reminds me of when the IBM computer first came out. It took over
Yeah.
like a 20 by 20 room, and now your phone has more computing power than that gigantic computer that came out 50 plus years ago. So the same thing will happen as people or companies begin to scale that to really grow into the mass market.
Yeah, it's very exciting and it's just crazy to think about the past to the future now. Are you bullish at all on the idea of sidewalk delivery robots or types of robots or automation replacing cars and vehicles being delivered in cars?
Well, I don't know if I call myself bullish.
Right.
I would just say that progress continues whether we like it or not.
Right.
There's been challenges with those robots on city sidewalks that are uneven, or people breaking them. They'll take them and knock
Yes.
them over. Trying. I don't know why. They have no money and it's just food. They've experimented a lot of it. I had an opportunity to go to a conference where Nestle sponsored from they work with a company out of Israel. It's a gigantic drone, and they
Mm.
would on a rope drop the food down to be delivered. All these things are going to continue to happen. But at the same time, there's the backlash of it. Look at all the hysteria about drones in New Jersey,
Yeah.
where people don't know what they are. The other thing, which is bizarre, but there's these South American theft rings that are using these drones to be able to go into look in the windows of people's homes to see if they can spot anything that's valuable there and then use it to break in. So there's good applications and there's bad applications,
Yeah.
but inevitably progress moves forward and we will see much more of this. I think the self-driving cars, which have been
Yeah.
tested and are out in the streets right now. I don't think they have them in Minneapolis, but they're big in Phoenix and some parts of California. And I've seen them, I've driven around them. It's different. I'm not sure I'm ready to get into a car and not have any control over what happens, right? But progress is inevitable. I think it'll continue to change and there'll be other innovations in those spaces. Like I said, not necessarily bullish, but hopefully optimistic that this will find a way to help us. We need the help in the restaurant industry. The
Hmm.
economics of the restaurant business have changed dramatically, and not just because of labor, not just because of commodity prices, but the ability to compete and differentiate. Food on demand, I remember when it first started, there was a big
Hmm.
issue about, well, will anyone come? And I remember the first one, there were 300 people there. They expected like 150. And then it grew and it grew and it kept on growing because that channel of off premise became big. And if you look at the five channels that exist, sales channels that exist in the restaurant space, off premise being takeaway, I'll include drive through with that.
Mm.
And then I'll include delivery with that. Those three channels have become very, very significant and important. And this is not just a bolt on, this is a DNA change to a brand. And the
Right.
ones who have adopted it properly and did a good job during COVID to do it correctly have really benefited from it. And I think food on demand has been one of the biggest aids for restaurateurs to go there and say, what do I do now? They were desperate for information. And you guys
Yeah.
really presented that in a great way.
Well, thank you. We appreciate the kind words. Yeah, it seemed like food on demand was right in time for, when the pandemic hit and everybody had to learn delivery and everyone didn't have a choice anymore. Where before it was, this is a channel we're exploring. And even now as we build the agenda, we're, seeing that adapt even more. And now it's okay, we're all on delivery, but what are the best practices for handling our omni-channel reality, our digital guests, and then we have these new technologies come in. So yeah, the space keeps changing. And if anyone's listening, you should definitely attend Food on Demand to learn all about that.
Absolutely.
All right, moving a bit on from the technology side, but kind of into the value wars and pricing area. We touched a bit on that a little bit ago, but I just want to get your take on that quick. You mentioned a bit about this value wars, and it's interesting to see the pop-up of value-driven deals, but also seeing that it hasn't been working the best for all brands. So curious on your take on that, Fred.
Years ago, about 10 years ago, I had a chance to work with Steak and Shake. And one of the things that we did was develop something called 4 under 4. And
Mm-hmm.
it drove a high double digit in the 20s and 30s of growth for that brand across 650 restaurants. So I learned it firsthand that and this was going through the recession, okay? So there's a lot of people in pain and they couldn't afford much. And what I learned is that if you can give people price certainty, where they know upfront before they even walk in that they will only spend X amount of dollars, they will step in and go experience it. It was a great, compelling reason to go. And at $4, it was stupid not to even try it, right? Why not? Let's go see what it is. Now, let's go fast forward to right now, the golden child is Chili's.
Right, yeah.
18% in the third quarter, 30% in the fourth quarter of increased sales. Traffic, not as much because there's some pricing in there, but their check average really hasn't gone down. Now, the thing that they were able to leverage is that QSR went up so much in price that now all of a sudden Chili's and QSR weren't so far apart. Where the typical, always the millennials and centennials that are looking for the quick service because they don't have the time or the money. All of a sudden, it's like, I'll try the sit down restaurant. Why not? Chili's narrowed their menu, made it simpler, produce things quickly, gave price certainty at 3 tiers with the pick three. But if you're getting a burger, a side, and a drink, or something else, you might buy a margarita because the drink will be a soft drink, or you might buy a dessert. So the check average hasn't been hurt as much, but their traffic has really gone up. So my lesson is about price certainty and not be afraid of that. For years, you talk about this barbell strategy where you have a low price offering, that value menu. In the old days, it was 99 cents. It's really hard to do 99 cents nowadays because of inflation. But you can do a $1.99 or $2.99. And then you have the people who want to splurge a little bit. It might go up to $7.99 and so forth and so on. That has always been in play. It is still in play. But I think not all companies are doing it in a way that is compelling to the audience to come and try it. And let's face it, you got the president of Applebee's just stepped down. Why? Chili's just went up 30%. That's tough in the marketplace when your competitor just left you eating dust, so to speak.
Yeah.
And McDonald's is struggling to find a way to come back. At the same time, you have brands like Cava and Texas Roadhouse who just have always given value. They haven't had to do these deals or anything like that because it was always built into the concept. And so I think the ones that didn't have that are trying to figure out what's the best way to approach it without losing margin. That's always a challenge.
Yeah, that was a great breakdown. Thank you for explaining. And we talk about taking price and so forth. Should people be modeling what Chili's did, or was this kind of a one-off? Wow, this really worked this time, but we'll see the next earnings call.
You look at imitations. This is a serious form of flattery. I would say study what Chili's has done, but it
Hmm.
wasn't just price. They did menu, they cleaned up their operations, they invested in their restaurants. They did a lot of things. It wasn't
Right.
just a quick flip the switch, but study it, see how it applies to your brand. Yes, by all means, go after it as best as you can to see what it works for you. But it's important to understand who your guest is. The beautiful thing about what Chili's did is they attracted a whole new cohort of customers.
Right.
That was what they did that I think is really the benefit of them rethinking their brand in a very unique way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's always interesting when I follow some of these legacy brands and how they're updating to attract new generations or be more modernized. So we'll keep an eye on Chili's. Anything else you want to mention on how restaurants can stay competitive today with so many new concepts emerging, or how to stand out in a crowded market?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I see the answer in two ways. There's one is make sure you understand how you're differentiated against your competition. That's really important. And in order to do that, you need to understand who your guest is and what do they need, that you're really guest focused. And everyone says that, but not everyone is. They're not really guest focused. Who's the voice of the guest in the boardroom when they're coming up with harebrained ideas? Who's really representing the guest and who really understands the guest? Generally, marketing is the one that's supposed to represent that, but that's really the key. How am I really differentiated so that in the consumer's mind, because we're overwhelmed by information every single day, I have a clear understanding of what my favorite restaurants are, where they are, and so forth and so on. So that's one. The other one is culture. And in the work that we do at Results Thru Strategy, to me, culture is the secret weapon. The companies that had the healthiest culture came out of COVID in a very, very strong way. Chick-fil-A, as an example, right? Others did not. And we had, what, over 30 bankruptcies last year? Now, some of that was not due strictly to culture. Their balance sheet was upside down, whatever the case may be. But if you don't have a way to engage the vast majority of your employees to support your strategic initiatives to be more successful, you will fail. You can't have just 10% of the people pull in to try and improve things. You need 90% of the people minimum to be working aggressively in the favor of the business to improve the business because they see the value for themselves. And I'd say that many companies that we work with sometimes aren't even aware of the culture. Culture exists whether you're intentional about it or not. But once you're intentional, oh my God, watch out. That's how you harness the creative energy of all your employees, as I said earlier, to move forward in a significant way toward what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, especially as we discussed the rise of technology and automation. I think again, it's important for that culture to be positive within your brand. Okay, Fred, we are actually already coming up on our time, but before I have some wrap-up questions, anything we didn't mention in general? We covered a lot of topics, but that you'd like to add as we go into more into this new year?
You hit a good round of questioning, rapid fire.
Yeah, rapid fire. Yes, we had a quick one. Obviously, if anyone listening, you can always reach out to Fred LeFranc. They are the people to talk to for all your restaurant needs. Okay, so just to wrap up, Fred, I like to end it with a few fun questions to get to know you better outside of your role. To start off, what might be something people might be surprised to know about you that you might be doing that not everybody knows, whether that's a hobby or a secret talent or anything like that?
Well, I'm going to talk about my daughter.
Okay.
Only because it's not about me. My daughter is the showrunner for Mac's show called The Penguin.
Oh, wow. I had no
And
idea.
they just, Colin Farrell and Kristen won some Actors Awards. She just
I'm
won the Writers Guild Award for The Penguin with all her writers room by her peers. And I'm proud of that. My son's also a screenwriter. He's done some great shows. The first season of The Affairs, Pieces of Her with Toni Collette on Netflix. So I'm very proud of my children. They're very creative in that regard. And
Wow.
those are the people I'd rather talk about. My own personal hobbies and stuff like that are basically I love to cook, as I mentioned earlier. I don't have any robots in my kitchen, chopping away, and I enjoy wine and celebration with friends.
Well, that's amazing. I'm familiar with the shows, so that's awesome. Have they been in the industry for a while?
Yes, yeah, both have been
Amazing.
for a long, long time.
Amazing. Okay, what are you looking forward to? Any upcoming trips or anything that you're excited for as we wrap up here?
I have a trip to Necker Island for the second year in a row. That's
Oh,
Richard
wow.
Branson's private home. I'm going there as part of a business conference, and I went there last year. It was very exciting. It was beautiful weather, unlike what we have here right now at 20 degrees. And that's coming up in a few weeks, and I'm very excited about that. I do like to go to conferences outside of the restaurant industry just so that I get a broader perspective on what's going on in the world and not just stay in the bubble.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we'll be seeing Fred at the next Food on Demand conference. He'll be hosting a panel for us. So I hope anyone listening checks that out. That's May 5th through 7th at the Bellagio this year. But that's all the time we have, Fred. So thank you so much again for sharing your insights. And I look forward to connecting again.
My pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in person at Food on Demand.